problem.
Real estate agent, are you looking to acquire clients consistently so you can grow your business and your income to live a great lifestyle? This is Dave Finale and the RE Skill Builder Podcast.
Hey everybody, Dave Finale here. We are here with Real Estate Talk TGIF, episode 153. That's right, 153 episodes. And this marks 150 weeks in a row. We've had 3 extra episodes. Those were John Cheplack, Tom Ferry, and Brent Gove. So we've had 3 specials, and this is 150 weeks in a row. I think that's a great thing for me as I boost myself, but it's 153 episodes. And we have today the founder and CEO of Call Action, which is the company automates the outbound to create inbound conversations for real estate agents and for salespeople. And this is Jessie Beaudoin from Call Action. Here he is. Thanks for coming, Jessie.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. As number 153, thank you very much. And that shows that you're consistent. So that's awesome.
Yeah, as I say every week, I tell people, I saw this being done poorly 150 weeks ago. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do this myself. So I decided that I needed to be committed to it. So I've done it in Florida. I've done it in Mexico. I've done it in a few other places, but you know what? I'm ready to rock and roll all the time. But I start the conversation, Jessie, all the time with the same question. So I have to ask you the same question. Do you know what TGIF stands for?
Well, the one that I know is thank God it's Friday.
Right, but that's pretty close, and everybody usually gets that one wrong. And the answer is thank God it's finale, right?
Yeah.
It didn't start out like that, but this is where it is. So, man, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I mean, it's a mutual friend of ours, Eric Sachs from Breakthrough Broker, connected us. Eric will be on in a couple of weeks, but he connected us, and we've had some great conversations, great talking about automating the outbound to create inbound conversations. But you've actually been in business and an entrepreneur for a couple of more years than just Call Action, right? So there's a story I heard about you selling lemonade and then getting busted.
Yeah, so my father has always been self-employed and gave me the entrepreneurial bug really young, basically always pushed me to kind of try and do a hustle, right? To work hard, basically. So I was maybe about 9-10 years old or so, and we started a lemonade stand. We used to do this really big automotive swap meet. And, you'd be out there in the summer heat and it'd be, 90 degrees. So I sold lemonade. And that started doing pretty well. Like, graduated from one little jug to all of a sudden, like a couple 5-gallon of those big jugs.
Right.
And so every swap meet kept on improving and getting better and bigger and stuff like that. So next thing we know, I start buying 6 packs of Cokes and then selling Cokes. And then, then that graduated to orange soda or whatever else. And then pretty soon it was like we were a full-blown little mini store and selling a little bit of everything. So then one day, we, based on supply and demand, a bunch of the people would come through and they're like, hey, do you have any beer? And so what happens, like, oh no, we can't sell beer. Definitely can't do that. So then we got a little bit creative, and what we started doing is selling peanuts for $1 and you would get a free beer. And so,
I like
that eventually, that little enterprise started growing and growing, because at the swap meet, it's literally acres and acres of stuff. It would happen every 3 months. So we would gear up for this big event. And so by the end of it, we're doing maybe 15, 20 cases worth of beer, selling basically peanuts and stuff. And so I had, signs out and all of that. So one day these guys come up and are like, we'd like a beer. And I would say, oh, don't have any beer. I'm happy to sell you a handful of peanuts and you get a free beer. And so guy basically, asks for, the peanuts and gives me the buck, and, I give him the peanuts and give him the free beer. And then he turns around and flashes his badge, and it was the ATF. And so I got arrested when I was maybe 13 or 14 years old for selling alcohol at a swap meet, and went to court and all of that stuff. They asked me about my grades, and I think the judge appreciated the entrepreneurial spirit. And basically, since I had the grades to kind of back it up, because I was pretty much a straight A student, I just got off with a probation for like 5 years until I was like 18 or 19 years old or something. So that was the start of my entrepreneurial journey.
But that actually gave you the boost to get going, because you made a couple of bucks doing that, didn't you?
Oh yeah. No, I did fairly well with that. So couldn't complain. It was enough to. I parlayed that money actually into. I started a car aerodynamic, like back then, like cars would have like those front skirts and stuff like that on there. So we started doing these fiberglass, like little skirts, and it was called Autobahn Aerodynamics. So, when you're 18, 19 years old, cars are pretty interesting. And my dad was a mechanic, so I kind of grew up around all of that stuff. But then my first real job, I was a telemarketer for a mortgage company when I was 15 years old. And so that's how I actually got started in real estate, telemarketing like that. And then right when I turned 18, got my real estate license, and had the little car business, and was basically trying to sell real estate, and ended up in mortgages for pretty much the next 20 years.
There's a lot of people out there that start in real estate and go to mortgages, and rarely do you see people going from mortgages to real estate. Why did you do that? Why did you go from real estate to mortgages?
Yeah. So, I went door knocking, and, back when I was 18, 19 years old, didn't have a beard. So people kept on telling me like, get out of here, kid. You don't even own a house. So it was easier to hide behind the phone and be good on the phone, which I'd already been doing for 4 or 5 years. So it was more so just physical thing than anything else. Is just people wouldn't trust me when I would show up and talk to them, because they were just like, well, you look kind of young. So, which is why I just went back into the mortgage side, and then stuck there for a really long time. So
you as time went on, your life working on the mortgage side was basically pounding phones, right? And that's where you started doing everything. Tell me how you progressed from there, and how you built the business from there.
Sure. So one thing I learned pretty quickly from my father was he was self-employed, and every 3 years he would work really hard for 3 years. Then he would close his garage. We would jump in the van, and we would travel cross country. We were originally from Quebec, Canada. So we'd leave from California and crisscross the United States for 3 months and spend a whole summer on the road, and go back home to go see family and stuff. And what I learned really early on, which had always struck with me, is that my dad had to work really hard. When he closed the garage, then nothing would happen, right? Wouldn't make any money. So in about 86, 87, he had bought me a computer, because he was always reading popular science and really encouraging me for growth and stuff like that. Really gave me this kind of growth mindset. So that when I got those first computers, it still didn't have like the internet browser. Like, just felt really complicated. I went to school. In college, I took a DOS computer class, and it just didn't resonate with me. But in about 1991, 92, the mouse came out on the computer, and then like Microsoft Office came out. And I got really curious about like databases and Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that. So what I started doing was some direct mail marketing. So instead of pounding the phones, which was really time intensive, I got into kind of copywriting and doing direct mail. So I started scaling that up quite a bit. And so, lost my butt basically early on, and not having effective direct marketing pieces. So really became a student of marketing during that time. And the CD-ROMs, my appraiser started doing basically was doing appraisals. And I don't know if you remember back then, but we used to have CD-ROMs at the time. Would sell every couple of weeks, right? And that's what the appraisers used for the recorded data to do their appraisers. So I started asking him to give me his old CD-ROMs of basically the old data. And so he would give me those CD-ROMs, and what I would do is I would find historical data based on time and that someone closed their mortgage, and I cross-reference that in those CD-ROMs. And so I started doing these really hyper-personalized direct mail pieces that would say, hey, Dave, I noticed you closed your house on, June of 1986. Mortgage rates were, 9.2%, right around there back then. And now we're at, 8.2, could probably save you X amount of dollars based on a proration of your current mortgage. And I would write these Excel spreadsheets and do that stuff. So I was doing hyper-personalized direct mail pieces and with laser printed envelopes that looked like it was handwritten and stuff like that. So I started getting pretty good at that stuff. So I did a bunch of that, sent out a couple 100,000 pieces of mail and did a bunch of business. And then eventually WinFax came around. I don't know, you remember WinFax? So when WinFax came around, I was like, well, I'm trying to get purchase business from agents, and I'd go around and door knock and stop office to office and stuff. So because I was pretty good at the computer, what I started doing is I would make the open house sheets. You might remember this. We'd do flyers with like 3 financing options, put them in the flyer box. So that was pretty good. Agents would send me, contact me and say, hey, can I get an open house sheet? I'd drop in the numbers in my Excel spreadsheet, print it out and fax it over to them. Well, then I started thinking like, well, I could probably make this even easier. Like I can automate it because I got to do scale. So then what I started doing is I would download all of the MLS data of all of the new listings in basically my area. And so I would take all of that MLS data, and I would do a mail merge and send out personalized flyers for every real estate agent in real time as they got listings. And so that got my name out all over the place. And I kind of grew that quite a bit. And a bunch of other like kind of creative things like that. And then really the defining moment was probably in 1994, 95 or so. I went to Inman, and then Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were there, and they announced like their DULP. So the automated underwriting. So I was like, oh, wow, this is like this computer stuff and this internet thing is getting really interesting. And the story was I was driving down the road with my dad. We were going fishing. We were going to go boating, and we were listening to early morning news. And, we're on the West Coast, so East Coast was already open. It was like 6 a.m. or something like that. And they talked about this IPO of this company called Netscape. And Netscape was kind of the first internet browser because about a year or so prior to that, they had come out with the www and the domain names. So that caught my attention. I was like, man, that guy just made like, $100 million like in a day. So I was like, this internet thing is going to be really big. And it had kind of been ruminating around. Like I had early like AOL and all of that stuff, but we didn't have the website domains. You just had like what we called an IP address. So you'd be like, if I wanted to find you, I'd have to find your chat room by getting your address, which is like 106.35 whatever. So once that came around, I got into learning about this whole domain name and stuff like that. So I was pretty early in terms of buying domains. So I owned FHAHomeLoans.com, VAHomeLoans.com. So I'd buy exact match like phrase domains instead of brands. And because the idea that I kind of thought about was like, well, the internet's kind of like going to a bookstore and Google's trying to be the librarian. And so in my mind, like I try to visualize, how do I go to the bookstore, right? If you walked into a Barnes and Noble, you go like, where's the section on business? And then you would go into the section in business, and then you think, well, I want to learn about sales. So then you would look for the sales section. And then you would look at the books on like real estate sales. So what you would look at is the title of the books that were related to real estate sales. And in my mind, I associated those titles of those books as basically websites. So I was like, if I buy the book based on the title that best matches my intent, I should probably get these exact match domains. It seems like it was pretty logical. So, and then I started kind of thinking about this a little bit more. I was like, when I buy a book, I'll open up the book and I look at the table of contents and I go, if the book is about real estate sales and it only has one chapter on real estate sales versus 20 chapters with different like sub chapters about real estate sales, like real estate sales marketing, real estate sales scripts, blah, 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 that's probably the book you're going to buy because it feels like it's going to give you the knowledge that you're seeking. So I grasped the concept of SEO and like these kind of very niche sites and exact match domains really, really early on. And so I was able to build up these websites. By 1999, I was generating about 300 loan applications a day.
A day.
A day, all for free based on SEO on Google and stuff like that. And in about 2001, I just got out of the business altogether. I had 2 kids and I want to spend time with them. And I had this dream of like, I want to make money without working. And so what I started doing was selling those leads, because in 1999 at Inman, I met a guy named Doug Lebda, who basically says like, hey, we're doing this little internet company and we're going to do mortgages online. And that was the start of Lending Tree. And so a couple years later, they were looking for inventory because they started selling those leads to mortgage loan officers. And so basically I did a deal and started selling him all of my leads. They were outside of California where I serviced in 1999, 2000, gave him all of that stuff. And then the rest is just kind of history.
Right.
Exactly. Got into that and then grew that quite a bit. Built a for sale by owner website to generate mortgage leads, because I figured that we wanted purchase business instead of refi, because refi was really rate driven and I wanted it was more permanent. And as a LO, I was focused on the purchase business. So, I would go to all of the real estate conferences to learn the real estate business really, really well, but I had figured out how to leverage online to basically make money. So I didn't have to, do a bunch of stuff. So, so that's kind of how Call Action really started, was from my personal pain points of generating a bunch of business online and figuring out, hey, you got to like follow up with these people. You got to, you got to do this at scale. And that's how Call Action eventually came about, as my kids got older.
So when we talk about where you went from building the lead system for Lending Tree and all that other stuff, and you go into Call Action, what was missing, and what was the need that you saw needed to be addressed to go into Call Action?
Well, I mean, I think, there's a lot of money being spent on lead gen. And when we started Call Action, I was really looking at, we had been doing it on the mortgage side for a pretty long time, because Lending Tree and all of that stuff, Quicken Loans, like in 2001, 2002, they were already firing on all cylinders, right? And there was already companies that had been sold for, north of $100 million that were just basically lead generation companies. And so I had a pretty good network with those guys. But what I noticed is as we would sell the leads to mortgage lenders, like they would struggle with the lead follow-up and trying to get a hold of people. So that always kind of stuck in my head. And then when I watched how Lending Tree and Quicken Loans, especially Quicken Loans, because they really keyed in on this efficiency idea really, really quickly. Right. They were one of the first companies on a massive, internal call center, and they were some of the first ones trying to do it, virtual transaction basically, and everything via fax and email and all of those kind of things. So for me, I just watched that problem and I saw it solved on the real estate side. So when Zillow came out and Trulia came out, lead gen started becoming new for real estate agents, because before that, every agent just went out and bought their own IDX site and tried to do their own lead gen. But this was the first time that you had like companies, they were doing what Lending Tree had done. They threw a bunch of money behind it to generate inquiries from the public and resold that and arbitrage the cost of the lead gen versus the lead sale, right? We created that marketplace. So having had the experience on the mortgage side, I was like, okay, this problem is really going to hit like the real estate side here coming up pretty soon, because nobody has any experience with that. And so I just became really hyper aware of that. And just that really became the impetus for what we were doing, which is, how do you do more by doing less, right? So the idea of leverage, whether it's people or technology, it's the same thing. It's like, how do I do more by doing less? And so for us, basically, I just looked at, if I'm going to start a company or a tech company, I need to pick the biggest problem I can find, what we call the total addressable market. The biggest problem you can find is sales and marketing, right? In the entire world, because that's what makes the world go around. So although we're really focused on the real estate side of things, the call action solution is really for any kind of business out there that tries to get their phone to ring and needs to follow up with those inquiries that they're generating. So for us, I just focused a lot on the real estate side, just continued down my path of like what I knew really well. And we just try and basically help our agents as much as we possibly can to be a lot more effective, because the cost per lead, was getting really, really expensive. So, and now we're kind of here.
Yeah. So what's interesting is you follow along as you've just given a great history of lead gen over online, right? So I remember years ago, I was buying, we talked about this before the other day, and I was buying Google AdWords for like 2 and 3 cents, which was, everybody said, that's a lot of crap. It's not going to be anything. And we were getting these leads and we're starting to do business. And then of course, the issue that you try to solve, the follow-up, was the problem, right? So when this all started happening, the conversion rate was probably around 4%. And, I was thinking, what, if we had a follow-up system, and I was with the Century 21 system at that time. And what we tried to do was we tried to build, this Century 21 system to follow up on leads and have it automated. What you did was you took that and actually created that through technology, right? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So what we look at is, our business is trying to create conversations. And when we look at salespeople, there's 2 kinds of salespeople. You're either a hunter or a gatherer, right? So we kind of think about that problem. And where people struggle is the repetitiveness, the grind. We talk about it all the time, like, oh, you got to have grit, you got to have grind, like you got to pound the pavement, you got to do this, like this tedious work over and over, and then you're going to get the payoff. You'll find the gold nugget at the other end, right? But that's what creates the burnout, and it creates the inconsistency. So when we watch basically salespeople's income, you get this kind of, it looks like a wave, right? They work really hard because they don't have any business. They get a couple transactions. Then because they're busy there, they neglect basically the follow-up. So then their income drops. And then what ends up happening is most agents' income is based on 6 months worth of work. And we would just wanted to try and flatten that line and keep that a little bit more consistent and make it scalable by automating the stuff that people don't like to do. Right? That the difference between the hunter and the gatherer is simply the hunter is willing to do the stuff and will do it with consistency.
So go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, and it's just, if we try and solve the consistency problem, I call this like Newton's law of sales, right? Newton's 3rd law of motion is, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Right. This is the basic of sales. If you don't spend money advertising, you're not going to generate inquiries. If you're not making outbound phone calls, you're not going to get inbound inquiries, or you're not going to talk to people. So in our world is, if we can automate the outbound, if you're generating a lead or you're doing advertising and generating an inbound call, odds are when you call that person back, they're not going to be available, because we live in a world of interruption. And this is an attention deficit game, is we got to do multiple follow-up because we just got to get their attention again, right? So if we automate that, what happens, we create consistent actions, which then creates a more consistent reaction, meaning those inbound conversations that are going to come back. And that tends to be a better experience for both parties, right? Simply because if I make an outbound call, I tend to be interrupting someone. And so if I'm interrupting them, I have to be very good on the phone to like get them to start paying attention to me. But if we automate the outbound, and what happens is they allocate the mental bandwidth to say, okay, now I'm going to call back Dave and have this conversation. They're paying attention. that make sense? So their intent is going to be much stronger, much the same as the initial intent of when they submit an inquiry, because that's their peak state of interest. And so you need that peak state of interest, because interest basically creates attention.
So where is that peak state of interest? Is there I mean, you've said in the past that it's all a math problem.
Yeah, the math problem is the scale problem, right? It's like doing follow-up. So if you let's say, for example, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it would take on average about 6 follow-up attempts to get a hold of someone. And that was like what our data would show on, hundreds of thousands of attempts per month, basically. And now, the iPhone, basically with iOS 13, I wrote about this a couple of years ago when iOS 13 came out, where they were going to do this filter unknown callers. I basically said that, like, hey, we're probably going to drop from 20% contact rate on outbound calls down into low teens. Like, it's going to really hurt business. And so we focused basically on this outbound text messaging, because people became a lot more receptive to that. And because that message kind of lives in the phone forever until they respond to it, right? Or delete it, one of the two. So the scale issue is, if I got to get a hold of someone 10 times to get a hold of them after I've already paid to generate the lead, if I generate 100 leads a month, well, 100 leads a month times 10 follow-up attempts becomes 1,000 tasks. Right. 1,000 tasks, if it takes me 4 minutes to pick up the phone, look at the task list, make the outbound call, leave the voicemail, reschedule basically the follow-up thereafter, and then go on to the next one. Well, those 1,000 tasks at 4 minutes apiece become 4,000 minutes, right? And that's 65 hours. So all of a sudden you got a 160-hour work month, and you got 65 hours of that you spent doing something where 90% of the time nothing is happening, because you're not actually talking to anybody. That makes sense? So what we do,
100%.
We try and automate that outbound and that tedious and repetitious process through what we call authentic automation. And it's authentic because we have lots of merge fields, so we can make it feel hyper personalized. We have different phone numbers that we're using based on marketing source, so it's communicating. So if I have a Zillow lead, I'm communicating about, hey, I got your inquiry from Zillow yesterday, and so on and so forth. So if we make it feel real, then people will respond. And so what we're seeing now is it takes 10, 11 attempts to get a hold of someone. So we generate the leads, we make the outbound follow-up, that generates basically inbound responses. And what that does, it keeps the experience for the real estate agent much more native to their expectations, meaning they already know how to use their cell phone. And in your cell phone, what most salespeople do is we're really good at being reactionary. We're good at returning phone calls and returning text messages and checking our email. And that feels natural. It feels like that's what we're made to do. We like that busyness of being in demand, of people calling us and wanting to talk to us. What we don't like is this, and this is the difference between the hunter and the gatherer. The hunter is okay with hearing no and powering through that, because they got that grit and that grind to just be like, hey, I don't care if 20 people or 100 people say no, I'm gonna find the yes, right? But that's not how most people are.
Okay, so what you've done, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I've got Sekou coming on in a second to join with us.
Sure.
We're talking a lot about conversion and what we do on a regular basis. But if you've taken the quote unquote drip campaigns to a different level, basically, right?
Yep. So we do text messages, we send images, we send GIFs, so movable images in there. We can do ringless voicemails. We can have the drip automation call the agent to force them to make the outbound phone call. So we not just automate drip campaigns, we automate the workflow on a one-to-one basis based on the customer. So based on wherever the customer came from, if I want to call them every 5 days and check in with them, we're going to send a couple text messages. We'll put a ringless voicemail in there. We'll call the agent. So when he answers, it automatically is bridging the call and calling the customer. And if that customer calls that number or texts that number back, it's going directly to the agent, directly to their cell phone. And that feels very natural for both parties, because we need to be in alignment with expectations. So, someone who gets into real estate probably gets into real estate because they want to make a lot of money. Traditional recruiting is, I want to make 100 grand, be your own boss, set your own hours. Okay.
Right.
But the reality is, if, let's say the popularity of teams and stuff like that, we're not in alignment, because we say, hey, come join my company or my brokerage. You're going to sit behind the computer, learn how to do data entry, and you're going to pound the phones all day.
Right.
That doesn't seem like an alignment of expectations.
Right.
And if you're not in alignment, then people don't want to do it. And so what we do is we try and automate the stuff that you don't want to do. It's no different than your dishwasher, right? You invest in technology, a dishwasher, to do the repetitious stuff that you don't want to do, and the ROI is time saved.
I want to bring out my friend, my co-coach, Sekou Pyle, who I work with on a regular basis. Just let me get rid of this banner here. Brand.
Well, while he's getting rid of the banner, man, Jesse, come on, man. You knew I was going to come on and ask about the scooter in the background, bro. Man.
Yeah, that's a 1963 Lambretta. So I have a couple of them. So that one's my more museum piece one. But I have another one that I ride, and I have a couple other ones too. So
that is very sexy. Someday over Scotch, I promise I will tell the story of my summer on the Honda Esprit.
Oh, nice.
Scooting around in the Midwest, trying to get to look, check this out, the video store, and returning my videos and stuff like that. Dude, this I'm in the background listening to you guys talk, and I'm waving your flag back here, bro. I'm like, yes. Fuck that! I hate trips.
Right. So, I mean, it's just like it's Sekou. It's just like I said, he's making the follow up human, or personal, right, Jesse.
Yeah, we're really trying to make it feel like real and authentic, because when you think of like traditional drip campaigns, it's like day one, send this. 1 day later, well, because it's a computer, 1 day later is exactly 24 hours later. So if you have a system that's doing 1 day later, you send let's say a message at 8:30, because that's the time that the person registered. Then the next day you send another message. Well, they get it at 8:30 again, and then 8:30 again, and then 8:30 again. Well, that looks like a robot instantly, right? So what we do is we think about the small things. So we give you the ability to send a message on a Friday on a specific time. So if I can deliver a message, let's say Friday at 4:45, and that message could be a text message, it could be a text message with an image, it could be a ringless voicemail. Now all of a sudden the power becomes, hey, good afternoon, it's Sekou. It's about 4:45 on Friday. Just want to touch base and see if you were wanting to go take a look at homes tomorrow. Give me a call back at this number, and I'll follow up with the text message here shortly. Now, if I do that, and that is automated, and I follow up 20 minutes later with a text message with a link to my IDX website with a list of all the open houses, that feels real.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And what you're doing is you're just doing the things that in a perfect world, if you had one customer that you would do. And this is why it becomes a math problem. All business is a math problem, right? It's a P&L problem. It's a KPI problem. Or basically it's a scale problem. It's a leverage problem. It's the amount of people. If we get too busy, like right now, a lot of agents are drunk because they're like, hey, I'm so busy. Business is amazing. And they're confusing market success right now, market conditions, as personal success. And when business kind of changes again and things slow down, then everyone's going to get really desperate to work on their systems again.
Jesse, I call it the confusion between busy and productive.
Exactly.
Yeah. It harkens back to a time. Yes, I used the word harken. I've been, watching my Marvel stuff, right? So it takes us back to a time where the prospect, the contact, the customer client had more control over the entire journey, right? So, and it wasn't too long ago where they called the real estate agent to inquire about a property. The real estate agent called them back with the information. They set an appointment, and then their journey started there. Now, if they're trolling around inside of their Facebook, a real estate agent calls them out of nowhere, like, I see you're inside of my website, it's a ninja jumping out of the shadows, swinging their swords at them. And so what it sounds like to me is that call action is doing, and so the Appointment Academy call it tech, right? So the tech is doing tech, right? So the TECH is doing TEC, and TEC is text, email, call, right? Which is like the magical combination of unlocking the anonymous call rejection. It's all of these things. It sounds like call action is a system, not a formula. And yes, I emphatically agree with you that the math is the language of your business. Yep. How many X does it take to create a Y, which then generates a Z? Yep. And the part of the equation that I think that most agents miss is that it's not today business that your lead generation is creating. Right. It's tomorrow's follow-up that it's creating.
I want to take.
What I can talk about this forever, right? Finale.
Right, exactly. I want to take this. And I don't want to miss this, because this is when we talked the other day, Jesse. This is like my light. You talk about light bulbs going off.
He's been talking about it forever since he spoke to you.
My head exploded the other day when you talked about something. You talked about most deals coming from the SOI, not past customers, right? I know I'm changing the topic a little bit here, but this all has to do with call action and how it brings people together and how it builds a funnel, right? But Jesse, you talked about something else instead of a funnel. Could you go into that for me, please?
Yeah, sure. So everyone talks about a traditional funnel, which is you have a wide kind of top, then you narrow people down that journey. We talk about the hourglass instead. So the idea basically on the hourglass is that in traditional lead gen, you have the top of your funnel where you're generating leads. And then we basically call it the ART funnel, which is aspirational, research, and transactional. Those are the phases inside of that top part of that funnel. And so when the person makes the inquiry, which is what a lead is nothing more than someone who has a question. You've been able to elicit an inquiry or a lead, have someone ask you a question that you can respond to. And that is very different than a referral, which someone is looking for somebody else to help them. So the first thing where agents kind of fail is that differentiation between what is a lead, because they still call their referrals leads, but it's not the same at all. It's totally different. And when we think of like a traditional funnel for lead gen, which is basically inquiry generation, what we need to do is we need to have leads or inquiries and have actual conversations. We need to go deep with those people. And it's that initial consultation with the customer from the inquiry or their question is where you build value by providing knowledge and giving them a map on how to achieve their goal. And if they are here right now, they made an inquiry on the internet because the internet didn't answer their question, right? So you posed a question, you did some kind of marketing with a creative headline that created a question, elicited an inquiry or lead, and you need to have that conversation with that customer. And it's that opportunity of that inbound conversation is going to give you, the salesperson, the ability to earn that person's trust by sharing knowledge and doing a consultative kind of sale. Okay.
Right.
If they're not ready, which is going to be realistically 95% of your leads are not going to be ready at that moment in time.
Right.
They're not transaction ready because they are in either aspirational phase or research phase. And that's why we need to give them a map, because they're trying to get to transaction, but they don't know how to get there, and they need a guide. They need someone to tell them how to get there. That's why we got to give them the map. And in our world, that acronym MAP is a mutual action plan. So let's say someone comes into your funnel and you have a consultation and they want to be a homeowner, And in that consultation, you discover that their credit is not quite great right now. Well, you need to create a map by providing them value to tell them the waypoint to your final destination is we need to get your credit score up. So I'm going to refer you to a credit cleaning person and my lender. That's going to be your action. You're going to work on cleaning up your credit, and mutually, my action is I'm going to follow up with you in 3 months to make sure that you arrived at the waypoint on the way to your destination, which I'm going to guide you to. And that's how you earn someone's trust. Now, when we think of that funnel, those conversations is the most valuable part, because what's going to happen is if I don't have conversations, I can't get closings. If I buy 100 leads and talk to 0, I still end up with 0.
Right.
If I buy 100 leads and only talk to 20 and convert 1, most people are going to say my conversion rate is 1%, right? But that's a wrong KPI, because you can only close the people you talk to. So if I talk to 20 and close 1, my conversion rate is 5%. So if I have more conversations in the middle of that funnel, meaning I talk to more of the leads I'm actually talking to because I'm doing multiple follow-ups, and I'm not skimming off the top and getting lucky and getting a hold of people with one phone call, but I'm going deep and making those 10, 15, 20 follow-ups that it's going to take to get a hold of them. Now, all of a sudden, I can talk to 60 or 70% of the leads that I generate. So if I still convert at 5%, but now instead of only talking to 20 of the 60 or of the 100 that I generate, let's say I talk to all of a sudden 60 of those, I go from closing 1 deal to 3 deals. I just 3x my business by simply having more conversation. Okay.
Right.
Those leads, as they close, get deposited into the bottom of the hourglass. Okay. So the bottom of the hourglass is your CRM. And in that CRM, what's going to happen is every lead that you had a conversation, that you provided value, gets deposited into your CRM as a sphere of influence. That becomes your SOI no matter what. Now, some of those people that went through the top of the funnel will also become your past clients. So you have past clients and sphere that you are now creating. So if you go with the idea that my lead gen is to develop relationships at scale, instead of thinking I am looking for a closing, now your intent is totally different. So what you're going to do is you're going to start to make these large deposits in the bottom of that hourglass of sphere of influence and past customers. And once that bottom of that hourglass is filled, just like a regular hourglass, you can actually flip it over. And now all of a sudden, that sphere of influence and those past customers refer you leads, that give you conversations, that give you closings. And you just keep repeating that cycle over and over, because if most business, you take a look at it, you look at NAR stats, 50% of people's business is based on basically referral-based business. But it's not 50% of their past clients are referring them another customer, because less than 18% of people actually go back and use the same agent again, right? So the reality is most of the business comes from this sphere of influence of those relationships that you're creating. If you gave enough value at the beginning, if you were the guide who gave them the map on how to achieve their goal. Because if you're not doing that, what's the value in the realtor-client relationship? Do we want to become door openers? Because that's not our business. It's a relationship business.
You know what, Jesse?
Got to develop relationships.
You know what the sort of the catharsis of business after the quarantine and the COVID and all of this and that is that people are realizing that they can't start a business based just on the customer service aspect of the business, just based on the customer service interface. You can't open a restaurant just based on how your waiters are going to be dressed. You know what I mean? It's just, you can't do a business because I'm a people person, and, you know, and so all of this that you're talking about, I've found that most agents that are successful, by the way, have a Frankenstein monster version of what you're talking about. They're pulling a little bit from this, and they're pulling a little bit from that, and they're pulling a little bit from this in order to make this like ultra component stereo version of what you've just put together in, you know, one space, almost one-stop shopping. Talk to me about two things. when I'm referring an ally, I would consider call action an ally. When I'm referring an ally to another agent or to a customer or client or something like that, I've got the 3 R's, right? So they have to be highly regarded in the industry. They have to be highly reviewed by their customers and clients. And they have to be highly referred by other agents or other people, right? Who do I know that knows you, right?
Right.
But the 4th R that no one ever talks about is reliability, repeatability, right? And how, what kind of reaction does the company have to the industry, to the market, and to the agent style? Your call action seems like, it almost seems like it you have to have a little mini human being inside of each robot. Like, it's like how do you do this and react to the market so rapidly?
Yeah, I mean, what we're doing is we just take what is the best practice, the thing that when you wake up every day, you should be doing. And I just tell customers, imagine you had one customer through their entire life cycle. What kind of service would you give to that person? What would you say and do? Like, if you imagine that perfect world or that perfect experience, because it's all about an experience now.
Yes,
if you can create that perfect experience for one person, you're simply leveraging technology to make that experience repeatable. And so, because the most successful businesses in the world have systems and they have processes. And what happens, what I see in the real estate industry all the time, they're like, oh, I got systems, I got this, I got that. And I was like, yeah, your systems are shiny objects. The problem is that it's a shiny object and it doesn't do anything because nobody's following the process. The process is too complicated to work the system. So if you take a McDonald's as an example, they have a very well-oiled system, which is the restaurant and the delivery of the food and how they're going to cook and all that stuff. But what they've been able to do is make the process as simple as possible, because simple processes can be easily completed by people that don't necessarily need a bunch of skill. So
it ain't rocket science.
If you if you lower the skill set to follow the process, you're going to get the repeatability and the consistency. McDonald's is successful not because of the quality of the food, but because if I get French fries here or in Detroit or in Europe, they taste the same everywhere. That's
everywhere.
What it is, right? So classic Michael Gerber E-myth, right?
Yep.
Is you got to McDonaldize the business, and you do that by simplifying the process. What happens is most agents who try and bring on technology and bring on systems, they try and make it too complicated.
Frankenstein monster.
Yeah. Then that's the Frankenstein monster. So they're not consistent because the process of doing whatever they need to do to make the system create the repeatability and the scalability and the reliability that you're talking about doesn't happen because the input is not consistent. If there's
the abnormal brain, right? It's the abnormal brain that they put inside the monster.
It's the translation, tool systems processes. It's the translations from the tools. They got tools. Now they put systems to work with the tools, but they forget about the translation from the systems to the processes because we overcomplicate it.
Well, finale. I tell you what, the thing that gets me, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jesse. So the thing that gets me is that I'm damn good at selling. I'm phenomenal at selling. You put me in front of a spreadsheet, even if you told me what to do, by the time I get to line number 2, I'm going to start questioning my process. I'm going to start questioning the system. I've noticed that the resources that I use the most are ones that come with an easy button. Yeah. Right? Like plug your shit here. What's your name? What's your phone number? What email do you want people to respond to? Push start. We'll take care of the rest. Yeah. If I've got to put the campaign together, I should not have hired you. You know what I mean? I'm sorry.
I believe that call action is doing that because Jesse works with you can tell me the people you work with. I mean, you work with people that we work with, right?
Yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of the biggest names that are out there. Some of our clients are, Gary Ashton, #1 Remax in the world, basically, Robert Slacks, Kyle Whistles, Veronica Figueroa,
big team.
A bunch of people like that. Tom Ferry's talked about call action a bunch of times on a bunch of his shows. So we understand the problem because I've kind of been in these trenches. So unlike most tech founders might come from hey, I understand technology and I think there's a problem and I'll try and solve the problem. For me, it was kind of the opposite. Is I've been a little bit lucky to be be that hunter, face those problems, and then have a little bit of a penchant for basically technology and figure basically how to make the system and the processes work together. I think, one big problem is that people think I got systems and they associate systems as all encompassing, that it is the process and the tool. And that you got to disassociate those two things, right? Because if you're just saying I've got a CRM, it's kind of like saying I need a hole and I got a drill. Now, if you don't know the process of actually putting the drill bit in, sizing it correctly, and to make the hole, you don't know the process of using the tool, then the tool is never going to be effective.
I laugh because it's probably the best way to put everything we've talked about in the past 45, 50 minutes, because it's tool, the system goes with the hole, and when you put it together, you can actually, after you get it done, build the process.
You can have the outcome.
That's 100%. So one of the questions I want to ask is, we've talked about, working with a couple of our friends, Kyle and Veronica, and you talk about they use an ISA model. So talk to me how call action. One of the things we talked about the other day was the ISA model. It holds agent accountable, and it also assigns the automation, because we're talking about a lot of automation here, right? So how does the ISA model work with the automation and call action?
So, what's going to happen is an ISA, the difference between, let's say, the ISA and the agent, right, is the agent is a 1099, usually a high D. That's why he doesn't like systems and processes. And it's not in alignment of why they got into real estate, because I want to be my own boss and make my own hours and do all those things. That's why real estate agents oftentimes have some difficulty. But when you have an ISA model, now basically you have someone whose sole job is that repeatability and being consistent in basically actions. That's the goal, because that's why you're paying them, is to be consistent. On an ISA model, they're going to hit the same math problem too, right? If you give them 500 leads a month, all of a sudden they get capped out. Like if I take Robert Slack, who's generating 10,000 leads, 12,000 leads a month, all of a sudden, even though he's got an army of
Hey, Jesse. Yeah, Jesse, I'm doing a quick interruption because I've got to run.
Sure.
And what I want to do is I want to extend a personal invitation to our Appointment Academy next week. Any day you want. There's over 100 productive agents that join us for a week. They do lead generation and lead follow up, and your system would be an awesome accoutrement to their bag. And I wanna see the rest of your motorcycle collection there, right? Please, I'm gonna get in contact with you. I absolutely love this conversation. You sound like my hero. I'm out. I love you guys. Later, finale. Thank you.
Pleasure. You have a good one.
I apologize for that interruption, but I knew he had to go because he has a 12 o'clock.
Yeah, no problem.
So I'm going to keep going with the ISA model and stuff.
Sure.
Let's work on that real quick.
Yeah. So, so what happens is the problem eventually becomes the same, which is you're going to hit a math problem of capacity, right? All the tools do is make the process easier, faster, and cheaper. That's what a tool does. Like I can cut down a tree with basically a butter knife. If I'm patient, it's just going to take a lot of time. I can use an axe. I can take a dull axe, or I can sharpen that axe and be more efficient and more productive. I can take a chainsaw and do it even faster. So the idea with the ISA is that you're trying to refine the system and build consistency, but eventually they also hit a cap because capacity is a math problem.
Yes,
right?
it is.
That's all that it is. It's just you have certain amount of time, which is finite on a daily basis. You have the same 8 hours as everybody else. And why are some people seem to be 10x more productive is because they figure out all of the inefficiencies in their life to create scale to be more productive. Right. And so you eliminate the things that are time consuming and tedious that have no outcome that is profitable, or you put someone in between that can do the work for cheaper than what you're going to earn from the output. So the input, you invest in the input to have the high dollar productivity output. So in the ISA model, what's going to happen is once you start getting, a bunch of lead generation, eventually they hit scale or capacity too, because let's say I'm a big team and I'm running 500 leads a month. So month number one, those leads are going to, on average, take 10 follow-up attempts. That's going to be 5,000 attempts. Well, 5,000 attempts at, let's say, 3 to 4 minutes a piece, all of a sudden 15,000 minutes. 15,000 minutes is like 200 and something hours, almost 300 hours. So now all of a sudden, I need 2 full-time ISAs to do that follow-up on those 500 leads. But that's month number one, because month number two, 95% of those leads, I still need to follow up with them. So month number two, I generate another 500 leads.
Compound effect.
I've got 975 leads that I have to follow up with on average 10 times. That becomes 10,000 tasks at a couple minutes a piece, becomes 30,000 minutes. All of a sudden that's 1,000 hours. And now you have to grow this army of people because they hit capacity, they hit scale. And so all that technology does, the story arc of technology, right? The bell curve of technology is really simple. Technology at first is very expensive and it's very hard to create. And what happens is Moore's law, computing gets easier, gets cheaper, gets faster. So technology becomes more available to everybody, right? If we take the iPhone in 2007, that transformed the world, all of a sudden that was a really expensive tool. Yep. Right? Or a fax machine before that, or an internet computer, or whatever it might have been. Any technology, when it first comes out, it's really expensive. But the bell curve of technology is expensive to eventually creating scale and leverage. So the tools get refined and they're able to create capacity. And so then what happens is you hit scale. And then the end of the bell curve of technology, the story arc of technology, always ends up at cost. At the end of that story arc is cost, because as you create leverage and it becomes cheaper and faster to have leverage to basically automate processes that are tedious, then you can lower your costs and companies will compete on cost. This is how Walmart won, is by leveraging technology to do just-in-time merchandising, right? They didn't need giant warehouses. They keep it in everybody else's warehouses to offset those real estate costs. And they only did it at the very last second because they looked at it as like, our most inefficient thing and most expensive thing is the cost of real estate to store all of these products. Well, if we don't have to do that, then we can win and we can save costs at the other end and beat the competition by offering products lower.
So the ISA takes it and puts it into call action and assigns how it's going to work.
Yeah, leads come in to go usually straight to call action. We basically get that ISA into the first conversation because, again, we want to make them efficient. So if I can get them having 20 conversations a day versus 1 conversation a day, like think about it this way. You can have an ISA and you're going to say, listen, I want you to sit behind the CRM and pound through basically this and do 200 dials. If I make 200 dials at today's contact rates of about 10, 15%, they're going to be lucky if they talk to 10 people, 15 people, maybe 20 people. Most of the time interrupting them, which is going to simply lead into call me back later. Okay. Right. But if I basically have call action that's running in the background and making those tens of thousands of follow-ups, all of a sudden, everything starts to become inbound to the ISA directly. The customer is paying attention. The ISA now has scale and can have a lot more conversations. They don't have that downtime of effort, right? So, because if you just like the simple math is, if I did something 10 times and there's only an outcome 1 out of those 9 times, is that efficient? It's not, right? I'm paying that person either which way for the 9 things that they needed to do, but there was no outcome. So the 1 outcome is actually way more expensive because of the amount I had to invest to get there, right? And that's where technology provides that leverage and makes that significantly easier. So ISAs basically use the technology to get conversations at scale. And then when they do that live transfer or transfers back to the agent, the ISA continues to follow up with the customer using some of our campaigns. We have something called an ISA handoff. And what it does, it holds the agent accountable that they're going to pick up the ball because they continue the relationship with the customer that they established initially. And they just continue with that technology to say, hey, did Dave reach out to you? You know, how are things going? Did you need any help? Are we taking care of you as a company? And big companies have these kind of safety nets to make sure that they have these processes to make sure that their system of their company is operating and delivers the best experience. As we are in an experience economy, right? People are comparing the experience of buying real estate with the easy one-click purchase of an Amazon. You're like, why can't this be as easy as Amazon?
Yeah, I don't think it ever will be, but I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. And or Uber or anything else, right? And the idea is that because technology creates experience, it makes an experience easy. Real estate needs to pay attention to this, excuse me, because what do we remember at the end of the real estate transaction? If you ask someone a year after they close, do they remember the commission rate, the mortgage rate that they're paying? Do they remember any of that stuff? No, they're going to define it.
Right.
They're going to define it as an experience. They're going to say it was good, it was bad, it was stressful, it was, and that's how they define the transaction.
Right.
And big technology companies are figuring out or trying to figure out how to make that easy, right? And what we know is that in an emotional, highly charged emotional state, people want to talk to people, okay?
Right.
There's a reason why Zillow does live transfer phone calls and is not trying to use AI to have conversations with people, because they know that the customer wants to talk to the real estate agent. They want that support and they want that connection and dependability of someone taking care of them. They want that emotional support. And so that's why technology is a tool and not a replacement. It makes us superhuman and gives us leverage to do the tedious stuff, to basically do the work. It's like cars are built by robots, but they're designed by humans.
Right. You know what? It's what we're talking about is simple down to the basics of our business of sales. However, what all goes into it, it can complicate. But when you talk scale, and if you don't think about it and don't worry about, as we said, the Frankenstein monster, it's a lot simpler than we're trying to figure it out. A lot of times our minds try to work way too hard, way too much.
Simplicity is really hard, but simplicity wins. Think about it this way. Why does Apple iPhones have 55 or so % market share, and then all the other platforms basically split the rest? It's just because of simplicity.
Right.
They figured out how to make it easy. And in a world of distraction where things are very complicated, emotionally, you seek out easy because everything else is so complicated around you, right? So if we seek that out, we want consistency in our lives. We want basically to feel good. We don't want to be stressed. We're risk averse on all those. These are all Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, this is all basic stuff. And what happens, we need to take that spaghetti code of like that entire transaction and simplify it into what are the touch points that matter the most. The only thing that matters the most is I need to talk to as many people as possible, do what I say I'm going to do in the future, and provide real guidance to them when they need me. And that is my value. If we think about like an attorney, right? The attorney does the consultation. The value is in the consultation. It's in that confidence that you get in that person who is sharing their knowledge with you to give you some guidance. And that's why we call it a map, is that we need to give people guidance on how to achieve their goal. If we're not doing that anymore because we're too transaction focused and we're trying to make ourselves just door openers, we're losing our eye on the prize in terms of why people value basically real estate agents. And what's going to happen is basically there will be commission compression because we're devaluating our basically value to that customer, that what we do is the consultation, is providing them guidance, is providing them confidence in the transaction. You know, today, probably an appropriate day for this, like you can go and do your taxes on QuickBooks, right? But most of us probably have an accountant. Now, what's the difference? If I go to the accountant's going to share with me strategies. He's going to give you basically different ways that you can do your tax, how to set up LLC versus S Corp, C Corp, so on and so forth, how to move your money into 401ks. He's going to provide you guidance, all the stuff that you could have figured out on your own.
Right.
But the experience feels a little bit easier. And what does he do once you give him all of your crap, all of your paperwork? They just input it into QuickBooks.
That's exactly it.
Right?
That's exactly it.
So the value is not in the outcome. The value is in the conversation.
Conversation with the consultation. Yep.
Yep. And the consultation.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
That's what we need to get. That's what we get paid for. We get paid for establishing trust as salespeople. Because if you don't have trust, you will never earn a commission. It doesn't matter how many doors you open.
And that's what I mean. We can talk about this market and compare it to the market of 15, 16 years ago. I believe there's striking differences between the two markets. But I will tell you that market, in my opinion, created order takers. And we're almost to that point a little bit now, not as much because it really takes hard work to find the home now, you know. Right. So I call action can really keep things rocking and rolling and stuff. And I'd love to keep going with this, but we already got time.
Yeah. We're already pretty long in, so we could split it up into a couple other ones.
Absolutely, I'd be willing to do that. Here's my question, man. How do people get in touch with you? How do they find you? I mean, I'm going to take this down so your number comes up again. So how do people find you?
Yeah, easiest way. I'm in California, so be mindful. This is basically all over the place. I'm in Pacific Standard Time, so feel free to call or text me. You can reach me at 323-741-2255. You can also basically visit our website. We do have live chat in there. A lot of those chats will end up back over to me because we'll get them basically, and we'll jump in on that stuff. So we do try and walk our walk and talk our talk in terms of having conversations and talking to customers. So yeah, you feel free to reach out to me, send me a text, anything like that. And like I have a little graphic about that hourglass funnel. Happy to share some of that stuff.
Awesome. And you have to do with me, yes.
Next time we get on the talk, we'll talk about a sales formula that I call basically AAA, which is answer, ask, and adopt. So
that will be next. We will do that again shortly. I promise you. I have two other things, and then we'll be done. I got to write that down because was the answer, ask, and adopt?
Ask, adopt. Yeah, AAA. I used to say AA, but some people are like, I already took that class. So
yeah, right.
So
anyway,
AAA.
What can I do to help you grow your business? This is the one question we ask at the end of each broadcast. What can I do to help you build your business?
I think, I don't think it's necessary to help me. I want to see the entire industry, succeed. I think as you're going out and coaching your customers, I think have them really focus and look at their business and simplify it into what was most valuable in your business, like what got you the outcome. And if you have them take a really deep inside look, they'll probably find out that it's still a relationship business, no matter how many leads that they bought. And it's the fact that they had meaningful conversations with those customers really early on. And then to have them start thinking about like, where's the problem? Why aren't you having as many conversations as you need to get your goal? And reverse engineer. If you want to do, 100 transactions or 100 sides, you got to reverse engineer the outcome. So how many conversations am I going to need in order to be able to do that? And then work your way back up that funnel. And what they'll kind of naturally figure out is that, we got a scale problem, this math problem that we try and solve. And whether you come to us, and there's plenty of other tools that are out there, the goal is that the process of using the system needs to feel easy. If you have a CRM and the process is easy and you can scale doing the actions that it takes to get into those conversations, use that tool. If that feels complicated, the process feels hard, feel free to reach out to us. We'll see if we can automate some of that stuff and make it the process of using technology feel easier.
Hey man, I want to thank you so much. And I know, I know when Eric had some issues, he hooked me up with you, and you said only if you could get a hat, you would come on.
Of course.
So we're going to be sending this hat out to you as a gift for being on our broadcast. Thank you so much. Just stay on for a second. We're going to go off real quick. Thank you so much for staying on. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, sir.
And we'll move forward.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.